Welcome to the Scottish Property Podcast. This is a show where we aim to educate, inspire and entertain through real life stories and interviews from people in the Scottish property community.
As always, thanks for listening and give us a follow on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Remember to join us at our monthly networking events on the first Wednesday of every month. Tickets are available on our website. So without further ado, we'll just cut straight into this week's podcast. Welcome back to the Scottish Property Podcast. John Cox, how are you doing today?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be back. Great to see you both.
Good to have you on again. I feel bad when we invite you on, John, that we've never got nothing too positive to talk about, and you're Mr. Positive.
Well, I'm not gonna lie. When we got the list of potential things to talk about through from Negative Nick last night, it filled me with dread. I've been thinking all night, going, God, how am I going to turn these things into positives? And let's be honest, most of them aren't going to be turned into positives. Let's just try and put some sort of positive spin.
As I said, we're always open to positive discussion on the Scottish Property Podcast, but week in, week out, Stephen, you don't seem to be too positive at the moment, but you and John together, I'm sure you can shine some good light on
Hopefully.
Wonderful.
So,
let's give it a go.
Obviously, this is a market update, guys, for the month of August. Looking back at August, what we do is we pull out some news articles. Honestly, I do try and get some positive ones, but as you know, there's a lot of kind of negativity around it at the moment. We also pull out some stats and data for the listeners as well. So we'll just go through these articles here and we'll just get the discussion going and see what comes of it. So first up is the City Let quarterly report. So they've got some good data on the Scottish PRS about rentals in all the different cities and what rents are doing, John. So having a quick scan through, if we take Scotland as a whole, no surprise to see that over the last 12 months, rents are up 11.4%. Your average rent now in Scotland's over £1,000. It's £1,081. If we take it down to city by city, and obviously you can talk about Edinburgh yourself, because that's probably where you've got the most experience at the moment.
Absolutely. Yep.
Edinburgh year-on-year change of 15.1% increase on rents. That's the average. Absolutely. So, does that kind of align with what you're seeing at the moment in the market?
To be honest with you, the way things have been the last 6 months, I thought it would have been higher.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's just madness at the moment. Absolutely madness. And as soon as there's a tenancy change and we're in a position to kind of bring properties back up to the rent where it should be, and we called it getting away from COVID rents, it's astronomical. And even then, increasing rents, you're expecting it to sit on the market for a little bit, and as soon as you're putting things live, the phone starts ringing in the office. We're talking 50, 60, 70 applicants within 24, 40 hours.
How do you fight with that? I don't know if I spoke about it before, but that moral kind of obligation of, we know you can get more market rent for your client. It helps your business, helps everyone grow, but to keep pushing them is going to make it more and more unaffordable.
Yeah.
But you're seeing it from the other side that there's still more and more inquiries. So,
well, if you go back sort of pre oil drops in Aberdeen, that was when we had our business up in Aberdeen back then. That was a big area of contention we had in the office. Me and my old man used to fight with each other. He was desperate to push everything up, and I was scared about thinking, look, is this bubble going to burst? And sure enough, the bubble did burst up there. Edinburgh itself is a city. The PRS there is far more robust. Now, we're following along. I'm not trying to suggest we're sheep in any which way it means, but we're following the average in the market. So we're looking at what's available. We're bringing, a property that's been rented out, new tenancies coming up. We're putting it market live. We're going alongside everything else that's on the market at that level. Whether it be a 2-bed, 3-bed, HMOs, whatever it might be. And yeah, it's frightening to see where the average rents are. We're putting it onto market at that level, some even below. What I've seen in the last few months is that there's a lot more landlords with a heart out there than what there maybe previously were, which is surprising considering that we're all being
portrayed as.
What does that look like then? A landlord with a heart?
Let's be honest. 4 or 5 years ago, again, talking about the Aberdeen market, we had landlords phoning us telling us, look, if you don't increase it to the same level that my pal across the hallway's got their property on it, I'll just move to a different agency. That's how brutal it was up there. Whereas now we're going to landlords in Edinburgh saying, hey, we're going to put your property back onto the market and we're going to put it at this rent. And they're saying, oh God, that's quite high. Are you sure? And we're saying, well, that's the average. You think, goodness, it's quite nice to kind of have that conversation. So some we haven't increased it to the levels that we could have.
We found that as well. Obviously, there are conversations that I've had in the past sort of couple of months, and we've suggested that the rent, say it's £1,000 a month, they'd be like, oh no, well, I would rather just go a little bit lower. to try and attract a better quality of tenant and a longer term tenancy as well. So you do get those. There are those landlords out there for sure.
I think again on that though, a lot of it comes down to the experiences they've had in the last 2-3 years. So if they had a quality tenant in during the years of COVID, etc., they maybe were at a decent level at that point. And maybe they weren't leveraged as high as other landlords out there, so therefore they haven't been stung with interest rate increases and so on. So they're quite comfortable as landlords. So when it gets to the stage where they're looking for new tenants, they're happy for it just to be increased slightly and just tick along with a nice long-term tenant again.
Yeah, no, it does make sense.
Well, let's not beat about the bush, because every market update that we do, these figures are obviously reflective of, you know, the government legislation that's been brought in and stuff like that. Because if we look at it across the UK as a whole, you know, Scotland rents are actually pushing above, you know, London in terms of increases now. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So, you know, looking through the cities, this is common throughout all the major cities in Scotland. Dundee up 16.2%.
We've had 4 relets in Aberdeen this month, and the average across the whole 4 is about 27% increase in the tenants. Has not been in that long. Wow. But I think the increase in Aberdeen's 13%, is it?
Yeah, 13%, 13.1% Aberdeen.
Trailing behind
Glasgow. Chris mentions wee photos here.
I'm all happy for positive.
Chris mentions wee photo here. It's on the City Lex report there. So he's always.
Well, he gives a great data update on the Scottish Property Podcast Aberdeen event, and he pulls a lot of the City Let data and puts together what each property type and area in Aberdeen rents for and what the increases have been. So it's quite good to keep their finger on the pulse with that.
And Glasgow 14.4%. I mean, wow. Talking Glasgow, I just can't believe, you know, we're putting on, because obviously some of our clients are investors, they need to make the numbers work with these higher interest rates environment that we've got at the moment. So you kind of like force your hand a wee bit to put the rents up and test that higher level. And I just keep getting surprised at how much demand. You know, you're putting flats on, 1-bedroom flats in the East End of Glasgow for £850 a month, which a couple of years ago, you know, pre-pandemic, you were talking about maybe £550. Do you know what I mean? And I'm amazed at the quality of tenants that are applying, you know, good working professional tenants, couples that are having to go to that extreme. And okay, it might be good at the moment, and people are thinking, well, this is still making good investing sense here, and it's still cash flowing, and this is a good investment. But really, long term, I don't think it's good for our sector. I don't think it's good for our industry. Because what happens in March 2024, 31st of March 2024, when the rent cap legislation and eviction bans come to an end, you know, what the government...
That's probably one of the most positive things I've heard anybody say, if we honestly genuinely think that's going to happen.
Well, exactly. Yeah. So what's going to come next? And it's going to be, they're going to look at, wait a minute, so landlords, the way they're going to see it is landlords have been exploiting the loopholes, and the loopholes being for new tenancies and newly listed properties, we can list them as much as high as we want. So they're going to look at that, and this is the feedback they're getting from tenants, because tenants are in the press day in, day out, complaining that when one of their tenants, they've maybe got a joint tenancy, and one of them leaves, then the landlord jumps in and increases the rent by £200-300 or whatever. You know, these are the stories that we're reading about. As soon as it hits national press and all that, that's when you've got the problem, because obviously the government are looking to please the voting population, and then they're looking at, right, well, what can we do now to take out that loophole? How can we implement longer term rent controls whereby landlords can't do that anymore?
Well, that's exactly it. I think they all need to take a hard look at themselves and realise, well, the best way to alleviate these sort of pain points is to probably stop putting so much pressure on landlords themselves. Let's reduce these costs. Let's bring down these interest rates where they can. Let's reduce ADS back down to some sort of sensible level, you know, and at least that way stop putting so much pressure on landlords to actually be able to own and afford these properties within the PRS.
And the thing is, it's happened at the worst possible time as well. So their whole thing was to try and protect the tenants, right? Obviously through the cost of living crisis, you know, inflation, rising energy bills, all the rest of it. At the same time, landlords are getting hit with the interest rates. So you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. either sell up or, you know, you put the rents up. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, it's not that every landlord is trying to get every last penny out of their tenant.
Yeah.
They've all had to maybe refinance in the last year, 18 months. Their interest rates have jumped, you know, double in some cases. We were just talking about it before we came on live there about arrangement fees. I'm sure we'll get to that at some point. They've been absolutely battered by the lending market, and you know that money's got to come from somewhere. They can't just come out of their own pockets. They can't go sell their own house to continue giving somebody a rental flat to live in.
Mm-hmm. And you know, obviously the press have been having a field day with this. You know, the rent controls and, you know, great headline grabbers from tenants that are getting the rents put up and all the rest of it. And you know, there is some pretty harsh stories out there when you read about it. People are struggling at the moment, and that's the last thing they want to see is the rents go up. But I'll direct you to this article here in the Financial Times, I'll have you know, where none other than myself is
who's the author? Let's see who's credible.
I was actually, in a past life, I was a photographer for the Herald newspaper. And obviously I've got a lot of colleagues, ex-colleagues and friends in the press. So this photographer that I used to know phoned me up and he says, I'm with a journalist at the moment, they're doing an article on the rent controls, government rent controls and all that. Obviously I've been following you on social media and I see that you now do, you know, lettings, your landlord, the rest of it. Do you want to speak to the journalist? I says, no bother. So they featured me in the article in the Financial Times. So just moving up in the world, mate.
Is that a mugshot as well?
There's my wee photo there.
So Nick's probably giving his notice in for the Scottish Property Podcast. I'll probably need a co-host soon because he's going up in the world.
So and that's why you've got me on to the first test.
I mean, so when they phoned me up, my wife was like, I don't know if you should do this because obviously landlords are kind of demonised at the moment. Do you know what I mean? So your mugshot's going to be there and you're going to be like, but underneath the photo it says, it's got a quote from me saying, people are desperate. So, and then it's got me kind of like arms crossed smiling, so it doesn't look the best. So we're not profiteering from you know this situation. We're just simply trying to make our business work, you know, the bottom line. But they do feature a girl in Edinburgh actually, John, and what happened to her, as I said, I'll read it out quickly. Renters such as Leah in Edinburgh say that regulations do not go far enough. In November, barely a month after the Scottish Parliament confirmed the emergency legislation, the 30-year-old documentary filmmaker, who also runs a mental health charity, and her housemates were hit with a rent increase of 12%. Well, that's actually below the average, but this is because the freeze only applied to existing tenancies. Landlords were free to set whatever price they or the market deemed appropriate when signing the new agreements. So again, kind of advice to our landlords out there, if that does happen, then I would say take the opportunity to review the rent, you know, if you need to, because otherwise you could be stuck in there for a long time and only have the 3% increase yearly option.
Yep. We made the opportunity to increase the rents across our portfolio by 3%. We went out to all of our landlords and gave them the option, and not one of them came back and said no. Yeah, not one of them. And it's not them being greedy, but their own costs have increased as well. One of the points you mentioned there was market appropriateness. No one's out there trying to steal from tenants. I'll talk about it all day long and I'll happily battle with these tenants about this. Nobody that I know of, whether it be an everyday landlord with 1 or 2 properties or your institutional investors with large scale portfolios, none of them are trying to take every last penny from their tenants. It's fitting in with the market and their own costs. I genuinely believe that.
Yep. And when we do issue the rent increase notices as well, generally what I try and do is I'll try and get a market comparable, you know, in the area, and say, look, these in the area, these are the advertised rents at the moment. And quite often, you know, even with a 3% increase, they're going to be paying way below that.
Absolutely.
You know, so it's they are protected to quite a bit of extent for existing tenancies.
Very much so, and very few of them are actually moving on, because they're then the ones who do want to move are then looking at what's available on the market that's maybe similar and be a better location for them, and they're getting a huge fright about the increase in costs, so they're sitting tight.
Here's another article just linking again to obviously the crazy kind of rents that are happening. Scottish University, this is in the national newspaper, Scottish University town sees rents rise by up to 100%.
That must be in Fife.
That's in the kingdom. Aye, so it is the St Andrews. Obviously, that's linked.
St Andrews is a economy in its own, isn't it?
Absolutely,
It's completely separate. But
I was intrigued because I started like looking on Rightmove and all that and thinking, what options do students actually do? Because obviously it's like world-renowned university town. You know, everybody comes from all over the world. And then I was like, what options do they have for accommodation? I went on, there was like one listing for rent.
Yeah,
that's insane. I read the article that you sent, the one you're talking about, and it was quite the interesting thing that I saw was the halls. The student accommodation halls were put up by 8.3%, but we were allowed 3%. So the article was complaining from the students saying that, you know, as much as there's a rent cap and landlords can only put their rents up by 3%, student accommodations are allowed to put them up by 8%, which was kind of our point before, that we weren't all tarnished with the same brush.
Yeah.
It was a hit on the private rental sector.
Student accommodation and also social housing providers. So a lot of the kind of social housing where you would think that, you know, these are the people who are really, you know, needing the protection with that are on benefits and all the rest of it. You know, a lot of the housing associations were putting their rents up like 7-8% as well.
Oh, comfortably, yeah.
You know?
It's funny that they can increase theirs to that level, but we've still got 30,000 people, I believe, on the social housing waiting list just now. It's incredible. But going back to St Andrews, I mean, we've never seen anything like it. You know, we have quite a bit of dealings up there. I can't believe how many overseas prospective clients have come to us asking if we can source them off-market property in St Andrews for them to buy for their children. You know, they were literally, you know, deepest pockets going, and they'll buy whatever they can just so they can put a roof over their son's head for the last couple of years worth of uni up there, because they're sick fed up because not be able to find anything for them.
Again, that's another common theme developing as well with the universities. They seem to be really taking in a lot more foreign students as well these days. Don't know if you've noticed that with the inquiries that you're getting for the rental listings.
Yeah, totally.
Obviously, it's a no-brainer for the universities. They can charge a lot more, you know, for foreign students, basically. And you tend to find St Andrews has quite a high population of US-based of tenants, or students, should I say. And again, quite deep pockets. Parents getting really frustrated with their children phoning them saying, look, I'm going to have to come home for the summer because I can't find an appropriate property here to rent. So they're saying, let's just buy them all up. I mean, there's one.
Do you think that St Andrews have a knock-on effect into, I suppose, the areas like outside that Lookers, Garbridge, even up as far as Dundee, and run shuttle buses back and forward? Because it's almost in a bubble at the end of the. No train links to St Andrews.
You're onto something there,
yeah,
Steve. You're onto something there.
See, there's my entrepreneurial mindset ticking away there. Like, right,
mini bus charter.
I'm going up to Garbridge tonight.
You can actually get self-driving buses now. You could just launch one over in Edinburgh, actually, so you could just get that automated, get it systemised.
There we go.
So there's one student quoted in this article, and him and his flatmate are lucky enough to have one of the cheapest rents to St Andrews at £900 per month, but the 3 students living next door are paying $4,500 in total each month for their former council house.
Wow.
So
insane.
If you've got a former council house in St Andrews, then I think the yield would be looking pretty good on that at the moment.
It's phenomenal, but you can't get them.
No.
When was the last time? I remember looking at this a few years back, that Fife Council weren't issuing any more HMO licences in St Andrews. Is that still the case?
You know what? Pass. I don't know.
I wonder if that's got an effect on that.
Yeah, we'll check that out. I mean, I have heard quite a few stories. There was actually another article that I seen in Glasgow. It was a landlord get struck off the register because they went and did an inspection, and it was a 4-bedroom flat, didn't have an HMO. There was 12 people living in the 4-bedroom flat, and I guess that stuff's probably happening all the time, everywhere.
There's, again, I can't give any sort of stats or confirmation of this, but what I'm aware of is there's a lot of properties up there that do not have any form of HMO licensing. There's no landlord registration, there's nothing going on, and they're all just being rented out, room by room, on the side, cash. It's a real frightening
stuff
market
that you wouldn't have got away with, but because there's such a huge demand right now, and I mean, you're hearing these articles from students that are struggling to find somewhere.
Spare rooms on the side, you can rent it out via Facebook, here, there, and everywhere. just
pitch your tent in the back garden.
Charge you for a plot.
Right, moving on from there, because it is getting a bit kind of on the whole rent caps and all that. It is quite depressing when you go over it. Moving on to house prices. So, like, I mean, honestly, starting off this year with all the inflation and the interest rates and all that, I properly thought that by this time of the year we'd be well down negative on house prices, and the latest house price index from the land registry has just come out. So again, you're kind of in a lagging effect, because when they publish them in August, they're actually looking back on the stats for June, the completed, transacted, registered house sales for June. So we're a wee bit lagging there, but average price of property in Scotland was 189,424. But interesting, annual change, and it's been coming down every month. We get these stats in. We're now at 0.0, so absolute zero, flat line growth. So it's definitely, I feel, coming at that negative territory. I said minus 10% by the end of the year. I've probably still got quite a bit to go to that. But aye. John, you're in good place at the moment to talk about house prices, because you've just launched your wee plug for Cox Co. You've just launched your estate agency, haven't you?
We have indeed, yeah. In the last sort of, I would say probably since the turn of the year, a bit of a soft launch. In the last 6 months, we've really started to push on with our estate agency proposition, and it's been fun. I mean, end of the day, for people that do know about Cox Co, we've been selling houses for years, selling properties for goodness knows how long, and most of that's always been off market. I always make this joke that if Rightmove and Zoopla, ESPC had our stats from our amount of sales that we've done in the last couple of years, it would change a lot of their numbers. I would go as far as say last year we probably we sold the most property off market of any other agency across the country. For us to pivot, if you will, into estate agencies has been best timing for us possible. We've really enjoyed it. But again, with that, and goes back to your points there, market confidence is down. Buyer confidence is down. Interest rates are so high, people aren't quite sure what they're doing. A lot of your other estate agencies are still, unfortunately, especially in some of your smaller towns or your commuter towns, are, how can I put this, a little bit behind the times in terms of how they're valuing. So their pre-sale valuations are a bit too high. There's a lot of stocks sitting stale in the market, not because there aren't buyers, but because they're overvalued.
Yeah, the stuff that went 15-20% over the asking price last year has been valued at that point where technically it wasn't the valuation in the first place.
Yeah, I'm a great believer that there's a lot of estate agents out there that are doing comparables based on their own sale prices that they've done or achieved over the last few years, where things were traditionally going well above home report, rather than actually maybe speaking to local surveyors and looking at home reports and making a bit more of a conscious, more conservative decision on the values that they should be advising their prospective sellers.
I've been having a wee thought recently as well, and I remember it back in 2008 where agents just couldn't sell a fucking property. Like it was listed on on the window, on a portal, the calls came in, the viewings were arranged, the closing date was set, and the market's been like that for the last 5, 6, 7 years. It's just went in the one direction. I'm wondering if there's going to be a change in a estate agency where you have to train them. You have to train the staff, because now there's a different marketplace. You're no longer just putting out there and just taking in the information. You're now having to sell. You know, have to actually do a job.
You've got me excited.
Yeah.
Finally we're picking ourselves up. That's exactly right. And it's something that I've been harping on about. For anybody that follows me on LinkedIn, sees any of my videos, that's all I'm talking about, is that the estate agency side of the market needs serious change. I hate calling it a game, but it is. The property game needs change. And I think a big part of that is how people are selling properties. I think we need, as a country, need to move and follow towards the American realtor way of selling properties, being buying and selling agents. And that's basically what we've launched. You know, we have taken on 4 property brokers that basically are there to not just sell properties, but to assist people with their buying as well.
Okay, so that was a good plug for Cox Co. Moving back to the data.
Apologies, sorry.
So
I can't help myself.
There's the graph, guys, and you can see there. So, like, obviously, this was pre-pandemic, right? Average house prices were around about the 2%. Obviously, then they went crazy. We're up at 16% year-on-year growth. We're now down at 0. But 2% growth was before. So, I think that we'll definitely go in a negative by the end of the year. I don't think there's going to be this crash that we keep seeing these headlines up here in Scotland anyway. South East, South England, London and all that, different ball game altogether. And this is the problem when we pick up these these news articles, a lot of that is based on data from round about that region. So very much market specific. A lot of the agents that I speak to, estate agents, are saying that that kind of price bracket, you know, the 250 grand plus, you know, like, or the bigger houses, maybe 300 plus, that's been really affected a lot more, and things are sticking a lot more because of the high interest rates and all that. You know, and if you are stepping up in the property ladder and you're moving from a flat into a house and all that, that's really a huge jump for people. You know, so that kind of market. Have you not got a flip on the? Have you not got a?
Yeah, put it on the market.
At the moment?
It's about the 350 point and is slow.
Yeah,
very, very slow. So yeah, you can definitely see a change in that market point.
And that ties in with the data here on the UK House Price Index. It's the ONS stats basically. When I'm looking, they'd break it down into, you know, types of houses. So you've got flats, semi-detached, detached, terrace, that sort of thing. Everything's 0% apart from the detached, which is the higher value stuff, and that's negative 0.6%.
Wow.
So that kind of ties into that. I presume, like, you know, everyone's got loads of money in Edinburgh anyway, so that's that I was going to say, with those higher value properties, you know, potentially regionally.
Quite possibly. We're still seeing a lot of things shifting at the higher end of the market.
Yeah.
In Edinburgh, East Lothian particularly, there seems to be a lot moving, which is great. The problem is there's not enough houses being built.
Yeah.
This is the problem that I get. I think developers, house builders are doing really well at the moment. They seem to be getting snapped up quite quickly, which is quite good. A lot of renters now trying to get onto the market. There seems to be a lot more opportunity for them at the moment as well.
I had a viewing a house for ourselves on Sunday, and this unassuming guy in his 70s was the actual builder, and he'd been, you know, a landlord and building houses for 60 years. Like, since he was 18, he started, had a large portfolio, scaled it back down, and now he's building houses. And he says he's got enough land at his land bank over the years to build 200 houses and flats. And he says that right now, nothing's stacking up, and he's not even factoring in what he paid for the land because he can't remember what he paid for the land. And
wow.
the stories I was getting out of this older guy, I was like, holy shit, this is quite fascinating to see it from someone, a completely different perspective. Now, the house he was selling was 650,000. It wasn't a cheap house. So, but he says there's no profit paying for the labour costs and the material rates right now. The margin's gone. And interestingly, we got on to talking about interest rates, and he soothed my pain by saying that 40 years ago interest rates were 17%, and there was a prime minister who overnight announced, I've not fact checked him, by the way, this is coming from this guy's story, apparently was going to put up the interest rates 5% overnight, and they ousted them out and kicked him out government the next day and didn't go ahead. But he said 17%, and I was like, oh, so we're okay right now at 6%. Right, that's fine.
Said a guy that you met down the pub. No, I think obviously, like, we talked about this before, you know, these stories that you get, but you don't know how lucky you are because interest rates used to be 15-16%. But property values...
Well, that was my point. It says, when, you know, what was your first flat? I bought 2 flats in Dunfermline, and I got the 2 of them for 300 quid, and I was like, yeah, there's a difference. You can pay 17% on 300 quid. Try and pay it on your average property price right now at 189,000.
And the ratio compared to earnings as well, like the way salaries haven't increased in line with house prices.
I think talking about the way the market was 30, 40 years ago is it's pointless. But you know, if we look at even the last 15, 20 years, you know, we're very lucky in the last 10, 11 years that we've had such low interest rates. Yeah. But again, even if you look pre-crash 2005, 2006, rates were comfortably sitting at 5.5%. Even at, you know, 60, 70% LTVs for, you know, people with great credit going to your big sort of high street lenders. That was the norm. I don't like to say, look, we've had it lucky, but I do think we've went through a period. It's been a bit artificial. It's been good, and a lot of people have made some good money through it. People have got some great houses. Capital appreciation has been fantastic for everyone. But now we're going to a period of a bit of realisation, and I think it's not an overly bad thing. It's just trying to get, again, the interest rates dropped slightly, trying to get lenders' arrangement fees at a more competitive level.
We'll come on to that.
And then I think we're all going to be a bit more comfortable.
Yeah. Moving on to our next news story. Scottish Government will not pause short-term let regulations, says Yusuf. So our First Minister's got involved in the debate here. So it's this is high-level stuff now since the First Minister's commented on it. I mean, obviously for us in our industry, this was big news. This is to do with the short-term legislation that's obviously coming into place on October the 1st. And,
Still a big focus in Edinburgh, though, this isn't it?
Yeah, well, this is what I was going to say. So, Hamza Yusuf has come in here and says that, absolutely not. After certain council people said that maybe there should be a delay in this coming in after the judicial review, or there was some legal challenge by some group that got together. John, we'll bring you into this in a minute, see if you know any more about this. But, an interesting stat pulled out from this one. So far, Edinburgh City Council has received just 245 applications out of an estimated 12,000 short-term let properties in the city. So, people claiming that, this is going to absolutely ruin the economy. It'll be a disaster for the tourist industry and all the rest of it. John, what's your thoughts on this?
It is absolutely frightening. And I don't know where we're going to go between now and the end of the year when it comes to all this properties that's about to come to market. We're going to see an 80% reduction in short-term accommodation across Edinburgh and the Lothians, which is just vast. It's beyond crazy. And the amount of that is people's businesses that are just going to fall apart. Mm-hmm. The problem is that 60% of people haven't made any decision about what they actually want to do yet. That's that in the Herald. That I've actually think I've got a post going out on LinkedIn later today about that. Is 60% of people haven't made a decision what they're doing just yet.
Do you deal with any short-term lets at Cox Co? Is it just...
We are constantly valuing short-term let properties to move them into long-term, right, or to help short-term let operators to exit the market.
And how are you finding the investor or landlord? Are they looking at it from a point of view, with the rising interest rate costs and their costs associated with it, and they're no longer getting that good income off a short-term let? Are they choosing to put on long-term let, or are they choosing to exit?
That's what we're doing for them. Is people are trying to be more educated. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, the wise ones that are actually looking at this and not putting their head in the sand between now and 1st of October. So it's doing that analysis, and that's what they should all be doing right now. Is saying, right, if I can't get the license, what's next? Can I move this property onto long-term let, or should I be exiting? And by exiting, do I sell that off market? Do I sell it open market? What's my options? As soon as I sit there and look at it. If it's almost clear that they're not going to get the license, it's a case of them looking at the property itself. This is the one thing we've seen, and I've seen loads of this in the last couple of years, is a lot of these short-term let properties in Edinburgh are beautiful properties. You'll get 5 stars on Airbnb and blah-de-blah-de-blah. They think about moving over to the long-term rental market. And it's just not suitable, because most of it's, your wee 1 or 2 bedroom flat on the Royal Mile. It's got no bloody cupboards. You can't even hang any clothes up. You've got enough room in the bedroom to throw
you can stay for a few days, but you can't live in it.
Bag in a corner, but there's no room for a washing machine. There's no you can't live there long term. Yeah. So we've actually had to we've opened a number of prospective landlords' eyes over the years in Edinburgh and say to them, look guys, I love your property. I would love to manage it for you. But the problem is here, this is not a long-term let opportunity. And a lot of that happened during COVID. I've spoken about this a few times to people, is that we got inundated with landlords, short-term let operator landlords, wanting us to value their properties to put it onto the long-term rental market. And most agencies out there just took them all, brilliant, snapped them all up, put them all on the market. And there was a huge amount of property on the market. It was saturated. And tenants were spending so much time viewing all these properties. They're beautiful, beautiful pictures. Well, they're all done professionally for Airbnb and then get handed over to letting agents. So there was an absolute stack of quality looking property on the market. Tenants would go and view 10 or 20 of them and maybe find 2 of them were actually suitable for them. And that's what I think is about to happen again. Yeah. It was a massive waste of time for everybody.
Where do you see this going then? Because like you said, a lot of them are burying their head in the sands, and next stat there was 200 out of 12,000 licenses have been applied for. Out of those 12,000 properties, how many are actually going to get the license, and what do you think will happen? Do you think there'll be a mass exit to the open market to sell, or do you think there'll be
I think the realisation here is that very, very few of them are even going to get the licenses, even if they do apply for it. And then what will happen is you're going to see a lot of them going onto the open market. You'll see a lot of people properties being traded around. You'll see some institutional investors think there's opportunity here to buy them. Maybe dare I say it, there could be some flip opportunities here. Go back in, rip out a bedroom, put in some more storage, etc., turn it into a long-term opportunity, a long-term rental property, and put it back to market. That could be the way forward as well.
I think potentially that could bring down, the rent prices then, long-term rent prices.
I think it could affect the overall values of properties, and I think it could bring down the rental market as well.
It's a really interesting time in that sector for sure. Did you hear at all what the result was in terms of the group that got together, and so has that not had any influence then? It sounds like it's not really had any impact on.
Took legal action, didn't they?
Yeah,
moving forward. The group
not
that
deep
took
enough pockets. That's how I look at it.
Yeah.
To go away and fight it. And again, so one part of the legislation was deemed unlawful, but the rest of it's got to stay. So they made a quick amendment to the documentation, put it back out there. Now, Mr. Youssef's pushing forward, saying no, we're not changing. And instead,
crazy.
I mean, even that's what's the head of Edinburgh Council that has openly kind of admitted himself last week that, I think maybe there should be a bit more of a delay here, but we're going to push on anyway because my boss is telling me.
Again, it's like totally not dealing with the real problem at hand, and it's about building enough houses. So again, looking at creating a thriving economy, and the tourist hotspot Edinburgh is and all that, people want that kind of accommodation, don't they? I mean, they're absolutely booked out. Mm-hmm. You're taking that away, it's really going to suffer.
I think today marks the end of the Edinburgh Festival, isn't it? Might be the last one that investors benefit from their short-term lets.
This is the whole thing. A lot of them are taking in whacks of cash this month, and then they're all going to think, right, September, what do I do? Yep. So there could be a few of them with a few more short-term let bookings for September, but by 1st of October, they can't continue to trade in that sort of manner. So what are they doing? So it's a question I've been posing a lot recently, is saying, like, what are you doing? Have you made a decision? If you haven't made a decision yet, come and speak to us. Let's work this out.
And obviously each individual council was taking its own approach on this. So, listeners listening to this, I think it was Edinburgh, they said that basically all the tenement flats and all that, you're not going to be able to get the licence, pretty much. That was the crux of it, wasn't it?
Pretty much.
Yeah. How is it getting policed? Airbnb and Booking.com and these portals, do they have to have a licence number before they can list the properties, or is it, how is it getting policed to show?
Really good question. Honestly, Steve, I don't know. And I try, or people seem to think I'm someone who's quite well versed in this, and I've tried to read every last little bit of paperwork that's come across my desk, looked into regs, looked into legislation, and I'm still very much in the dark myself. I think everyone's very much in the dark of how it's going to move forward, post 1st of October. One of the things you mentioned earlier wasn't just Edinburgh, this is Scotland. And I was chatting to a guy this morning and driving here, gave me a call, and he's worried about his short-term lets in the borders and wondering how's the Border Council going to be looking at this legislation. And again, I think that was a really interesting point, is it's not just about Edinburgh. Yeah, it's going to decimate the Edinburgh rental market. I'm really interested to see what happens. I'm a wee bit nervous about it, but I'm interested. I think there's opportunity there as well for the right people. But what's happening in Glasgow, what's happening in the north, what's happening with all these beautiful short-term let opportunities on the west coast and so on that people come and go to. And,
I think the online booking providers, Airbnb and Booking.com, I think they will have to have
some form
a section, an area where you will, I don't know, again, I don't do short-term lets, so we need to speak to somebody. In fact, coming up, a plug for the Glasgow Property Podcast, Scottish Property Podcast networking event.
Who have you gone?
We have Scott Weir from Pillow Partners.
Nice.
So we'll be getting all the latest from him. They operate all over the country, so they'll have all the latest on that. But yes, absolutely don't know where this is going to go. And again, the government, they just need to loosen up the planning regulations as well, allow developers to give incentives for developers to build house building on a massive scale to sort this problem out, rather than trying to
stifle it.
There's a number of things there. I think going back to short-term lets, that's one of the issues that I see, is that some of these properties have been renting out for so long as short-term lets, and you can't pass the application over or pass your license over to the next buyer. So even if you are exiting, if you've been running a successful short-term let property for a decade, 15 years plus, and you choose to get out of the game, and somebody comes in and goes, that's a wonderful business, let me buy that off of you, they've then got to go and reapply from scratch. Unlike, say, HMOs, you've got, 28 days or whatever it is to kind of carry the application over if you reapply correctly. There's none of that within short-term lets. So they're finding a way just to get rid of these short-term let operators any way possible. I think it's frightening.
And it's this crazy, again, it's this kind of policy where it's just a whole blanket approach on everything. Like my sister has a room that she lets out for bed and breakfast up in Inverness. Even she's got to apply and get the licence and stuff like that. And it's just like, what? Do you know what I mean? Yep. She's not taking homes out of the out of the society. Do you know what I mean? She's got one room in her house, and it's just crazy.
It will change the strategy. I don't think the strategy will disappear, but it'll certainly change it. I think, been gone all the days, it'll be flats and communal blocks. It'll probably be little cottages or little terraced houses and stuff. And
or it'll be developments that can get developed purely for short-term let, so they'll have what's classed as sui generis application goes alongside it that allows them to rent as a short-term let indefinitely. And we're seeing a lot of that at the moment. There's a couple of big large blocks in the centre of Edinburgh that have recently been converted that we're actually looking at for a few investors that are exactly that. And so they're quite high-end stuff, but at least that way, people that are coming in, big deep pockets saying, I'll buy that as long as we definitely get the sui generis in place.
Getting on to that big development stuff, this brings us on to another article that I picked out. This is about build to rent. So different from the short-term stuff, but obviously build to rent, where big sort of pension money is coming in, institutional investment. They're building these huge, big, modern apartment blocks. And the headline here in the Herald was Glasgow 200 million flats plan paused by Get Living. And it's kind of unclear whether this is a direct kind of result of the government caps on rents and stuff like that, but I'm sure it has a part to play, or whether it is kind of the higher interest rate environment now not making it viable. But that whole government meddling in the market is definitely not helping the investment coming in to solve our housing problem.
I mean, exactly. I mean, if you look at these sort of things, that money's not your everyday landlord paying for that. That is huge, Canadian pension funds and all sorts paying for that. And if you're going to them and saying, hey, here's an opportunity, it's going to cost you £200 million, and we don't get to make the decisions around what the returns are going to be. The government's going to do so. And it's not going to be anywhere near as rosy as it was when we first pitched. Phase 1 we did 2 years ago was an absolute belter. You've made this much money. Phase 2 is going to cost you twice as much. The rates are going to be 3 times more, and we can't dictate bugger all for it. They're going to, well, no thanks, we'll put our money elsewhere. So
exactly, and there'll be plenty of other opportunities elsewhere, to put the money. So
absolutely. So of course it's going to again. That was a wonderful thing. Build to rent. It's great, and I think it's here to stay across the UK. But again, Scotland's going to get that whole area is potentially going to get decimated again. It's frightening.
Again, it's all so negative. I mean, I would easily get a job with the government, wouldn't I? I could be a great politician. I'd get on well, Patrick Harvey.
I'm trying to rack my brain to end on a positive note, but I'm struggling here.
Right, this next one's definitely not getting any better than it's buy to let. Arrangement fees are bordering on profiteering. Right, so we've gone from profiteering landlords to now profiteering lenders. So we're all in it together, aren't we? We're all profiteering from each other. So this is all about the arrangement fees. Obviously, I've seen a few put across to me, and some of the latest mortgages that I've been applying for, like 5% and all the rest of it. Now, when we look at that and we say you're taking £100,000 loan, that's a fair whack onto your mortgage bill, onto your. John, you've obviously got a mortgage wing as well at Cox Co. Dealing with mortgages for landlords and investors. There's one guy on this article describing it as daylight robbery. So, what are the kind of options there for people? What should people be looking at?
It's really difficult because these arrangement fees aren't just at the top end. They're not, for buy-to-let. They're not just for 75% LTV products they're all getting pilfered. Right down to your 60% products, even some 50% products that are on the market are on ridiculously high arrangement fees. Again, this has been going on for quite a while now. I think it's only now starting to become quite public knowledge. My mortgage brokers in the office have been fighting a losing battle for months, because we're getting so many inquiries coming in. As a lot of people know, that's where we specialise in is buy-to-let lending. And we are, going through, say, portfolio reviews. We're looking to refinance or restructure, or we're just helping that one-off landlord with a quick remortgage, or just to buy their first property. And initially the figures make sense. And then as soon as you start rolling in fees, it completely knocks the return on investment to a ridiculous level. It just makes it unaffordable.
Like you'd mentioned before, say you've got a 5% arrangement fee, plus you've got in Scotland their 6% ADS, you're now up at an extra 11%.
Yeah, before you even kick a ball.
Yep. I mean, even that though, I've recently we did a portfolio review of a pretty large 40 odd properties down in where was it, outside Durham. And immediately, as soon as that crossed my desk, I went, oh, this is exciting, because at that point it'll be 3% ADS across the lot. This might stack up a lot better than some of the stuff I've got sitting just now in Scotland. But when you take in consideration all the lending fees that go along with it, it was just as bad.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it still didn't stack up. It just goes to show ADS up here at 6% has been an absolute killer this year. Absolute killer.
Sure.
End of last year and this year. But now with interest rates, and then with that arrangement fees being as high as they are right now, even your properties in northeast of England that would traditionally always stack up and bode really well are struggling right now because of this.
Yeah, my new buyer entry point for portfolios is usually, it's like, oh, what's that discount you're looking for? And it's like, it's not making sense unless it's at least 40% discount to stack up. It really isn't, because you've got all these fees to add in now.
Yep.
But there are you know, obviously advices to get a good mortgage broker, get that whole of the market scanned, and you know, there's definitely lower fees out there.
There are, but again,
Higher
it's
interest rates.
You pay for
the
it.
high interest rates. Yeah.
Somewhere else.
There's been a lot more cash buyers coming to market of late,
I've noticed that as well.
which is great. Again, when I was here last speaking to you, that's what I spoke around. I genuinely believe the best way to invest in property is to do it really vanilla and real simple. You know, rein yourself in. Don't take on too much risk if you don't need to. And I think out of the woodwork in the last 6 months or so, we've seen a lot more cash buyers coming into the game. And that's been quite exciting, quite refreshing as well, actually. Not having to worry about the lending side of it, and let's just look at real quality properties with high occupancy rates, and bash on until kind of the market stabilises, and at that point maybe look to leverage then.
Well, that'll be the next government legislation. There'll be a ban on foreign investor buyers, a ban on foreign...
Oh my God, don't do this to me.
Don't suggest that.
don't even
I think
say it.
Patrick Harvey actually...
We're almost ending in a positive there, weren't
I
we?
bet you Patrick
Yeah,
Harvey
right.
actually listens to this podcast, so he's like, right, okay, that's the next thing we're going to do. That's it.
Yeah, give them
Because
more
that
ideas.
basically, like you, that's been a kind of a saviour for us as a business, as the cash buyer and foreign investors.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, they just come in and they still see it. It still makes sense as a good investment, you know. And we've had a lot of that lately as well, but you just wonder how much that's on the radar when they're talking about, you know, saving communities and restricting the amount of properties that are getting bought up for profiteering landlords.
Well, now you've said it. Patrick Harvey's sitting there in front of his laptop watching this back with his white cat, like the Bond villain. I'll put a stop to this.
Yeah. No, he was actually in that interview that I brought up in one of the early articles. They actually approached him for comment and he declined to comment, but that was the same response that we got as well. So he is the Minister for Tenants' Rights, doesn't want anything to do with us scummy landlords. So last article, guys, we're going to wrap up here. Sorry, it's still struggling to find a positive here. Well, no, this is kind of positive because inflation's going down. Inflation figures are going down. So where we were, like, obviously at the start of the year, up at there, I think 11%. So last time we had you on, it was like 10%.
That's right, yeah.
So we're now, CPI readings are down at, the latest one is 6.8%. Coming down, albeit I still think it's going to kind of be a bit sticky and just not come right down to their targets of, you know, target's 2%, you know, which is still a long way off considering what the kind of core inflation
Another
figures
interest
are.
rate rise it is then.
Well, that's what it feeds through to exactly. So, like, we're sitting now at 5.25%, I think the bank rate is. So, you know, until we really get down at that 2-3%, well, 3%, I would say, then maybe they can start easing off the pedal in terms of rising interest rates. What's your thought, you know?
So last week I was invited to a round table in RBS's head offices in their
very
boardroom.
posh.
I've got to be very careful what I say. It was under Chatham House rules, so I can't actually talk about who was there.
Right.
I can't talk about what was said. And it was incredible. Honestly, I was far smarter, and I made sure I was picked up that day when I walked into that boardroom.
We wouldn't get in midway with that.
no.
We wouldn't get in the round table.
Yeah, I was P's and Q's and being very eloquent that day. But it was eye-opening, and to hear from some of the powers that be about where they're trying to get the market to.
Right.
And what I can tell you is Bank of England's sole focus is to get us down to that sort of that figure that they've plucked out the air, 2%, and they believe it strongly that it's going to happen in the next 18 months. With a bit more short-term gain, short-term pain for long-term gain. There will inevitably be another increased rise, but they will get us back down to 3.5-4% within the next 18 months. We've got a bit more of a struggle ahead of us, but I walked out of that couple of hours far more positive than what I have been of late. I genuinely believe that if we can always get through this sort of next 12 months to 18 months, we're going to be in a far better place as a nation.
But I think the issue that we've got now is the kind of wage growth, like I've talked about it before. It's fair enough, getting the supply chain issues sorted out, and, the basically all the imports and all that were going crazy because container prices and freight and all that was going through the roof during the pandemic. That's all kind of been solved now, but the problem is it's now embedded in our labour force because we've had to put wages up so much, and now that is also contributing to the inflation. People have got a lot more money in their pockets, and the whole point in putting up the interest rates is to try and take money out of people's pockets. But obviously, as employers ourselves, you'll know we have to pay more for staff these days.
For good staff, yeah, absolutely. Of course we do. Of course we do. Look, I think the recent reduction in inflation is slightly artificial. I think it's only been energy and food prices that have dropped slightly, but everything else kind of increased ever so slightly.
Which is like the core inflation, which is the service
correct.
sector, which is most of what our economy is based on,
Yeah. So again, it's trying to get a better understanding around all those sorts of things. Believe me, if I understood inflation properly, I wouldn't be doing what I do. Yeah, I'd go get a job
it's
as
good,
an economist.
It's good to have an opinion, and
it's
I love reading about all that stuff anyway, so I like to always bring it up.
Yeah.
But like you say, nobody knows what's going to happen.
Again, that line of short-term pain for long-term gain, that I'll take a positive from that.
Let's hope.
If we can, knuckle down. I'm never one for saying circle the wagons, but I do think right now we need to kind of just give us work on stability, and we're all going to get through this.
Plus, if we don't have a good, vibrant working PRS, then none of the three of us here have got a business. Basically, we're all bust. So
absolutely,
let's end on a positive note. We did a podcast a couple of weeks ago talking about the positive still, and I'm still all in property. I just still don't see, nobody's come to me with any other better investment opportunities.
Not fancy Bitcoin.
No, I think that after it basically crashed the last, I mean, it's too.
I agree. We did talk about the fact that is buy to let dead in 2023. More like, no, we're just going to go through a bit of pain point for a couple of years, and the true, I suppose, investors and professionals will ride this out and be at the end of it.
Steve, I'm completely with you. Property itself is the first asset class to bounce back from any form of volatility, and it has been for the last 200 years or so. We just need to ride it out. We've had it good. We're going through a bit of a shitty time just now, but everything's still pretty strong. Occupancy rates are through the roof. We're okay. Yeah, we can talk about it all day long that we have done. And anybody who's listening to this, they'll probably have their ears are going to be sore after all this sort of negativity. But look, try and take something at the end of it. Give ourselves 12 months to 18 months.
Yeah.
We're going to see the market picking itself back up again. I think properties will start selling a bit faster. I don't think we're going to see a massive drop in value, if I'm totally honest with you.
No,
I think
so.
Scotland are in a pretty good place in that side of it. And I think interest rates will get themselves down to 3.5%, 4%. And everyone will be a bit rosier. We'll all have a bit more money in our pockets again to go out of a weekend and actually celebrate the fact that life isn't actually that bad.
There's a good positive note to end on.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was great having you on, John, again, and love that you've got so much experience in lots of different sectors. So really value your opinions.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming on.
I hope when I come on next, we've got a lot more positive things to chat about.
Well, I'm leaving it in your court to come up with the positive news stories next time. I know I only gave you a couple of hours last night to come up with something, but next time I'll try and give you a wee bit more notice. All right.
Wonderful.
Thanks a lot, John.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Appreciate it.